Welcome back to Rings and Realms Retrospective.
Today we're going to be talking about Kazad Doom with Alan Sisto and James Tauber.
And that's how I ended up with 72 Silmarillions.
Welcome. Today we are talking about Kazad Doom. We're going to look back over the entire season for Kazad Doom, and we are joined by two special guests, James Tauber and Alan Sisto.
Thank you guys for joining us. There's so much stuff from the season that we didn't really get to dig into with Rings and Realms. Believe it or not, with all of those hours of content, there's still more to talk about. So we really want to dig into Kazad Doom. And I would
delve.
I would love to start with the Durins.
Okay, now you're making me self-conscious about doing deep dives.
There's too many puns in Kazad Doom.
That's hard, actually.
Okay, so I want to start with the relationship between father and son, the role of their relationship as well, and where we're ending with their relationship, because the progression of him as king is not definite. So I'm going to start with Corey, if you can just kind of contextualize where we are with the Durin relationship, and then we'll throw it to you guys.
Yeah, well, if we think briefly, just to kind of recall the overall shape, right, of what we saw, it's clear that this is one of the dominant motifs of the Kazad Doom storyline, right? Starting from mid-feud, right? We got the banishment of, well, not banishment, but the
Deprincifying?
The deprincification, right? Yeah, of Prince Durin at the end of the last season, and the two of them in this, proud standoff at the beginning of the season, through the moment of reconciliation and forgiveness to then the downward spiral, and the way in which the downward spiral of the king was filtered so persistently through that father-son relationship, and then of course culminating in the moment which was on the one hand both enormously important as it was, the death of the king, but also enormously important, like sort of mythically, with the emergence, the Durin's Bane became Durin's Bane in the end of episode. I mean, so all this huge moments, and yet the emphasis, the primary emotional overlay of that whole scene, despite those other things, it's interesting to think that the death of the king and the identification of Durin's Bane, both of them took a back seat to the father-son dynamic in that scene. So clearly this is a major interest of this storyline. So I would love to hear what reflections you guys have on that particular sort of dynamic or thread through the season.
Well, if I can start by pointing out that this whole idea of father-son relationship is not just limited to the Kazad Doom storyline. Right? I think that's really important. Yeah. We look at the conversations that Elrond's had speaking about his father.
Yes.
We look at, of course, Elendil and Isildur, or even Elendil and Valandil, if you want to consider that.
Well, and
don't forget our favorite Kemen as well. Don't forget our favorite Kemen.
Oh no, I don't even want to think about that, Mr.
But that's a
father-son
thing too.
Relationship motif.
So I think though that whole father-son idea is echoed most strongly in this particular storyline. I mean, this is the heart of it.
Yeah.
And partly because we actually get both of them on scene together a lot, which we don't get with the others. And poor, Elrond's never going to get that.
Right.
But yeah, this was just a fantastic example of that. And I loved watching the dynamics, the changing in that relationship.
Yeah.
In the way it worked. But yeah, James, we were just talking about this last night when we did a fan track for some of this.
Yeah, I was just going to point out it's not just father and son, but parent combinations of all kinds. Mothers and sons, fathers and daughters. We see it all. It's an important part of a lot of the storylines.
It is, yeah.
But as you say, we see it most clearly developing, and the complexity of it all in this storyline. And the complexity of it's what makes it really interesting to me, that it's not just they have a falling out or they're reconciled. Right. It's that we get all of the details around that, the subtleties around that, the complexities. It's made it a really special
of that reconciliation. Yeah. I mean, we get that moment of a little bit of reconciliation, when Prince Durin does say, well, at this point he's not Prince, right? When younger Durin says that he's sorry, and you can tell it's very hard for him to say that. There's no official "we're reconciled." It's just, you look terrible, son. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
But that certainly tells us that there's a reconciliation.
Yeah. Oh, man. In one of the top 5 best lines of season 2 was when, Prince Durin is talking about the hard fists of the miners.
Yes.
And King Durin says, Wait till your kids grow up.
Yeah.
Such an amazingly good line.
What I loved about
Really
their
good.
relationship was the world building that they created around their relationship. So we
Yeah.
got to understand the structure of that community, the importance of that role within the community, through this very emotionally engaging, and obviously those two actors. I mean,
Yeah.
give me all the time you possibly can to watch more of that relationship. But it's that engagement that helped us, I think, attach to Kazad Doom.
And it's one of the, I think, tell me what you guys think about this. I would suggest that Kazad Doom, of all of the places where this show has tried to really immerse us in an alien culture, like a culture which is supposed to feel different from our own, I think Kazad Doom is by far the most successful.
Yeah,
instance of
I
that.
hard agree, because in many ways the elf culture doesn't feel very different. It feels very human.
Yes.
And I suppose that's a choice as well, right? Because
Yes.
we already need
Yes.
to identify with them. But yeah, the dwarves have a very different feel culturally, and it is quite strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So within Kazad Doom, we have obviously this very strong relationship, but also the politics that are at play. I'm curious about where you think we're going with this relationship. So we have lost King Durin, but it's not clear that succession is going to fall to Prince Durin. Thoughts?
My first thought is they could have really done a little bit more with building that up. That took me
Agreed.
very much
Where
by
was the
surprise.
foundation
Where's
for
this
that?
idea
Yeah.
that we have
Have
some
we
threat
even heard
to-
about?
I think we've heard about a brother once.
But not in terms
Just
of
the
like a
existence
competition.
of a brother, but certainly no question
Yeah.
of who the next heir would be.
Well,
And of course,
especially because he's named
named
the Durin.
It's kind of
Yeah.
a bit of
I mean,
a clue.
that's-
Well,
Yeah.
and the way in which the color
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the prince thing and its removal and then its return, that felt like a pretty clear signal.
That is a
Right.
very
that
clear
he
signal.
Right.
is
Yeah.
the heir.
I mean, when he walked back into Disa wearing it, he didn't
Oh.
have to say anything.
No,
She
right.
knew what happened.
And she was devastated. by
Yeah.
it.
Right, because you can see how with her the way in which at that moment Disa was associating the rulership of Kazad Doom with the Ring of Power. That's
Yeah.
the fact that if it were merely the sign of reconciliation, like a personal reconciliation
Sure.
between him and his dad, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's not
Right.
alarming.
But it wasn't.
But yes, I mean,
It was the implication.
yes, yeah,
of what that
exactly.
meant.
So
And the utter concern,
Yeah.
if you're going to fall prey to that, we got some other conversations
Yeah.
we need to have.
Such
Yeah.
as swear you'll never use the
Never,
ring.
ever, ever. Yeah.
Right. I do agree that reference at the end to that there would be a question about succession.
Yeah.
felt like a curveball.
Yeah. It
did.
That we weren't really prepared for.
I think if it had just been about the other dwarf lords,
Yeah,
it
right.
would have been
Enough.
fine.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we've sort of had hints of that, but they needed to develop the tension with the brother
Yeah.
a little more than just mentioning he existed.
In the last scene.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm really kind of glad they didn't bring him in this season and like complicate or like to mess
Yeah,
up the
yeah.
dynamic between
Yeah.
Durin and the king and the prince.
It would have crowded the storyline.
It would have
to-
crowded it,
to
and it would
introduce
have
him.
to
Yeah.
turn that from a 2-body problem into a 3-body problem would have fundamentally
Yeah.
changed the dynamics of that.
sure.
And I love the dynamics as they were. It's so. Here's one of the things that I find thinking about the way that relationship kind of maps onto larger issues in the story. On the one hand, right, you get in season 1, there was the sense of father-son mapping in a very common, normal way, right, on like older generation view, younger generation view. With Durin is like, those wild and crazy younger dwarves with their elf friends, and like back in my day, we didn't hold with.
We used to walk downhill to the mines both ways.
Both ways.
And we would never. I mean, like, think about the salty comment he makes about the relationship between the hammer and the rock when he's
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
about
Yes.
elves and dwarves,
Yeah.
right? So you get this sense of like, well, in my day we held no truck with those elves, but Durin is all like, oh, I am the new generation. I am like down with the elves, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there seemed to be that element, and so when in the season 1 dynamic, King Durin was resistant to Prince Durin's efforts on behalf of his friend Elrond, right, and the whole elf thing. There was this sense of the old king is resisting progress, right? And in season 2, that really shifts
Flips
around.
I was going to say exactly. There's a conservatism to King Durin in the first season that's then reversed.
Yes.
He's sort of the cautious. King Durin is sort of the cautious. Let's not proceed too hastily.
Yes.
The voice of reason.
Thing,
and the voice of reason almost. And then in season 2, it all of a sudden, under the influence of the ring, which we'll get to, he all of a sudden becomes the person with all the new ideas.
That moment where Narvi is explaining to him why we don't delve any deeper. Oh yeah, that was you that set up this.
Put that rule down.
Well, get rid of it
ignore
then.
that guy. He didn't know what he's talking about.
Exactly.
But I think that's what works so well because we see that progression, right? Like we see him as the conservative, we see him as the chaotic.
Yeah.
And that's
all
the
under
power
the influence
of the ring.
Right. Exactly.
And the effect that has on Prince Durin. Prince Durin's response to that, right? Such that it was one of the things that there are several moments, in like writing scripts for Rings and Realms when I'm like, I'll be writing stuff and I'll be like, hey, that's kind of fun. I didn't notice that before. Like the things that just kind of come out when you're thinking through and like one thing leads to another and you're like, I didn't expect to get there, but that's interesting. For me, one of the things that one of my most memorable moments there was in episode 7, I think. No, I remember it was episode 7 because I dictated it in the car on the way home from New York. So that was totally episode 7. Script writing, Rings and Realms. That's how it happens. Anyway, because I was thinking about the influence of and we'll come back. We'll talk about this more, but I was thinking about the influence of the ring and I was responding to the idea. I'd heard lots of people say, well, it seems too sudden, like this sudden shift to greediness and everything. Right. In reflecting on it and thinking it through, I was realizing what they're doing. King Durin becomes what will be dwarf normal in a sense, right? Like a slightly extreme version.
Yeah.
But if you compare him to like the Hobbit dwarves,
exactly, right?
That's what he is.
And the moment was when I was realizing that basically Prince Durin right now represents the values that Thorin only realizes on his deathbed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. When Thorin finally has the breakthrough to like, actually, there's more to life than treasure. Right. That's what Prince Durin's starting point, where he, and again, so thinking about the conservatism question, right? The changes. He starts off as resistant to the conservatism of his father, and then when his father changes, he now realizes the truth of that, and he becomes Durin and Disa are the representative of like dwarfdom as it should be.
Right.
The dwarfdom that is going to be. They are the tragedy in a sense, right? They are our relationship with, not just Kazad Doom, which will inevitably fall sooner or later. Sooner in this case, I think, sooner than one might think. But
the values.
But the values, right, of what dwarves used to be before they became. So, like thinking of what Smaug says about dwarves, right, and that didn't used to be true.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it highlights as well, I think, the importance of Disa in this equation, which is that
Love Disa.
It allows Prince Durin to have that conflict between the two worlds. Disa is firmly on one side, the king on the other, and then Durin's the conflicted one.
Yeah. And what a great example of a relationship as well. So like having that kind of partner that is helping you kind of process what's going on with your crazy dad.
Yep.
Who can't relate to that? There is that kind of conversation to be had. And the way that their relationship plays into the power dynamics of the king and the prince, I think is also very powerful.
And that it brings me back to the father-son thing.
Yeah.
Because what is it, even with Disa's, think how angry Disa is. Totally appropriately, right? And yet, if it weren't for Durin's grief, personal grief for his father, if it weren't for that relationship, Durin might have, and Disa might have, been drawn to act more radically, right? To be an actual rebellion, to do things which would themselves harm. Like what preserves Kazad Doom is Durin's love for his father and his unwillingness, his stubborn unwillingness to give up on his father. Like, yes, he's acting horribly even now when he's the blood of our people is still on his hands, right, as he's mining and he's bringing about our destruction as if he wants that. And yet he's still my father. And I won't raise my axe against him, in that final scene.
And of course, there is that moment where King Durin saves the day in terms of bringing life back.
Yeah.
Prince Durin is incredibly proud and happy at what his father's done, even though it's not what he wanted his father to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And even though he's not sure that it's a unilaterally good thing.
I think he's not sure because he does look quite happy at what's happened. But it is interesting to reflect back again to season 1 and remember that King Durin was the voice of reason with regard to sort of the mortality question.
Yes.
The elves,
their
elves
fate
are
is decided
unnaturally
by somebody, by
much
others
wiser,
far wiser than we are.
Yeah. So he's the voice of reason
Right.
in that regard.
Right.
Yeah, that was like our rule in season 1. It's like, so the rule is everything King Durin says is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just he doesn't lie. Like,
no,
he's exactly
just right.
He's exactly spot on.
Factual.
Yeah.
And yet that's completely flipped on its head
Exactly.
when he gets the ring. It goes the other way around. Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're talking about the power of the ring. So let's talk about the ring and how it kind of works with the power of corruption, the allure of that power, and how that works within the Dwarven community and culture.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things to unpack there. There are certain things that the ring does that we don't necessarily have not previously associated with the Dwarven rings. Certain properties that we maybe more associate with the One Ring. Everything from the whispering. We get that whole thing of what I like to describe as the Minecraft spectator mode, that it lets you see through the mountain and find where the ore is. And then, of course, obviously the greed, which is the thing that we know is part of it, although not without some complications,
some challenges, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Durin the Younger, when he's speaking to Celebrimbor, is like, greed is not the way my father is. That's not who he is. That's not in his nature. And we know that the rings amplify the greed of the dwarves. At least that's the lore explanation of the power of the rings. So I don't understand. How do you amplify a non-existent thing? This is 10 times 0, carry the 0.
Well,
0.
Do we think that Prince Durin is 100% objective about that?
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
I can imagine at one point in his life, my son saying something like that about me. Probably not right now, as he's a teenager. But, maybe when he was younger, he might be like, my dad would never do that. And, we've all had that. All of us who have kids have had that experience, right?
Yeah.
Where your kid praises you in public and you're like,
yeah, because that's not.
Let's move on before anyone examines that claim a little bit further, right? So it had a little bit of that feel to me, that I'm like, maybe it's not 10 times 0, maybe it's 10 times 0.5.
Exactly. In which case, at least it's
which is a big
number.
difference.
That is a big difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, we do see obviously the enhancement of greed, but the interesting power, which is sort of, made up in whole cloth, but certainly viable and interesting, and does give a good dynamic to the show, is this Minecraft spectator mode.
Well,
but it's limited. I mean, and that's what I want to point out. It's like, okay, so he can see how to get to daylight. Yes, he can see how to get to the Mithril. It's interesting that when he sees the Mithril, he doesn't see the Balrog.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of how the Palantiri.
Yes.
And this is, again, how the show is sort of amalgamated the rings and the Palantiri with the Mirror of Galadriel, which obviously isn't in the show, but they sort of all get blended together in this powerful idea of a vision of things. He doesn't see everything,
right?
And that's the weakness of the Palantiri as well. You don't see the full context. Yes, it doesn't lie to you. What it says is true. What it shows is actually accurate, but it's always incomplete.
The Denethor problem.
The Denethor problem.
Yeah,
I see the black sails of the fleet coming up, but I can't zoom in and see that that's Aragorn.
Right.
So I'm assuming it's the Corsairs of Umbar, and we're doomed.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I can't help but think of this in production terms either, that we as an audience are only getting what's in the frame. We're only seeing a certain subsect of what they want us to see as well. So what's going on around the big picture, it's the same situation that Durin's in, that he's not able to see beyond this laser point that he's in.
Right.
Incomplete.
And thinking about so on the one hand, yes, the seeing into the mountain thing is a whole cloth invention, but it's fixed to a Tolkienian endpoint.
Oh yeah, right? Absolutely.
The end point being Tolkien saying several times that this led to the possession of the rings led to the great accumulation of wealth. Right.
Every one of the Dwarven hordes is founded on a ring.
It's founded on a ring. How?
Right.
Like,
this fits that.
Right. Yeah, like what? Because there's never an explanation.
Right.
How does having a ring lead to the acquisition of wealth? Like,
right.
Greed. That's easy to imagine.
Sure.
Like that having a ring would change your character in some way.
It would change your heart, but how does it mechanically
actually
get you the wealth?
Right. As a get rich strategy, how does that function? And so they
Are
provide
you looking for notes?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And
because if all it's doing is giving you a multi-level marketing scheme, that's not going to work.
Right.
You need to actually get some real wealth.
Yes.
And how do you get the wealth? Well, you see where the gems are. You see where the mithril is.
Right.
You obviously navigate relationships with the other dwarven lords to obtain their riches.
Yes.
Then you institute a 100% sales tax.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I was going to get to that. We'll presumably at some point talk about how the power of the ring differs from the way that the stone singers work. But before I just on that, the way they convey the greed, I liked the way that we just saw these little vignettes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of how the greed was working in
The
terms
piles
of
of gold
taxation,
being brought
the
to
piles
him.
of gold,
Yeah.
the tributes, all of those little things.
I also liked
done.
seeing the little snippets of how the ring was working for greed, but also taking them over. So we almost got these little Gollum-like moments,
we got
right?
addiction moments,
Addiction moments. Exactly. It's mine.
And
It's mine.
the
Where
Bilbo,
is it? You took it.
the Bilbo. Oh,
Yeah.
I half expected him to say, "Oh, there it is in my pocket."
There it is. Exactly. Yes.
You know? I mean,
there it is on my table.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was akin to that.
Because Corey, you'll love this. That was actually a callback that worked for me because it was subtle enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we've had that conversation about the callbacks, the visual and dialogue callbacks to the Jackson films, but this was one that made sense.
Well, I think that the key thing there with the callbacks is if it's done in the same context, if it's conveying the same attitude in the same context, it works. It's where it's just done to check the box that, they said those familiar words.
I bet me. No.
Ooh.
Okay.
Corey, your thoughts?
No, it's not true that it doesn't work, or it's crit-fic to say they're just doing it to check the box and
Fair
call
enough.
back.
That's fair enough.
It's true that some of them don't work as smoothly because they require you to stop and do more work to make the connection.
They take you out of the current
you have
context.
In
In order to step out and do the work, you've got to step out.
Yeah,
Right.
you've got to think about it. You've got to stop and think about it. And sometimes they work more like
organically,
the connection is cooler once you make it, and sometimes less cool, right? But I agree. Where it's smoother is where it's is where that connection is. You can make it in the moment,
Yes.
right, and you can feel it, and that is not always successful. But yeah, anyway, so no, that's thinking about. I want to think about the word tribute. Right? I feel like it's a word I haven't thought about much. Because what it suggests, the word tribute suggests a connection between the greed and the power.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Because it's not just about I'm acquiring money, right? It is I am changing. I mean, with the
I'm lording it over
marketplace,
you.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
levying
I am
tribute.
changing the relationship between the king and the people.
Yeah.
I am changing the relationship between this king and the other king. You are now my subject kings, basically, the
Yeah.
other houses.
My vassal
right?
states, yeah.
And so the way in which they make the greed expressed in terms of power and authority so that we can see, because in other ways we don't see that as clearly, right? We don't see him becoming he does sort of insist on having his own way, but again, it's not, one wouldn't say like he's become power hungry, like that's not the expression of it, but we can see it, right? That's still sort of involved, I think.
Yeah. That's
Definitely. Well, we've kind of alluded to it before, but I think we should talk a little bit about the relationship of the dwarves to the mountain and the powers that they do have, what the mountain means to them, and how we're navigating that going forward.
Yeah. So I loved this is my favorite element of Kazad Doom world building in season 2. I love the development. We got the hints of it. It was, the stage was set for it with the resonating from Disa and her talking about the resonating back in that first dinner scene in episode 2 of season 1. But I loved the development of the relationship between the dwarves and the mountain, culminating in that moment, right, when with Prince Durin and King Durin in episode 8, when Prince Durin says, "I learned that from you."
Yes.
Right? It's
not
not our
our
mountain.
Yeah.
Right?
Our mountain,
You told me that. And so the way in which they take their fill in the blank answer to the question, how does it increase your wealth, and tied that into this overall theme of the relationship between the dwarves and the mountain. That was, to me, that was the big drama of season 2. That's the issue with the light thing, the sunlight thing at the beginning. It's not the fact that the sunlight can't get in is only a symptom of the more serious problem, which is that Disa and the Resonators can no longer connect with the mountain. There's a divide between the dwarves and the mountain. Something's there.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole idea that in the stone singing version of it, the mountains are willingly giving up the information. They're hearing what the mountains want to tell
You're
them,
asking nicely, and the
mountain is responding.
As opposed to the Minecraft spectator mode that I'm actually
taking
with my X-ray goggles kind of thing.
It's like the difference between like a passive sonar and some sort of active radar.
Right.
Yeah, I can work with that.
Yeah, no, it is. It's even before you start the mining and the accumulating, that very vision is it's a kind of violation. It's like it's like
invasive.
Yeah, it's invasive. It's like stripping the mountain naked.
Yeah,
and the mountain isn't consenting to that.
Yes, exactly. It's a non-consensual one.
It's not part of the. It's not relational.
Yes.
And now I'm picturing Galadriel and Boromir, and Boromir saying, "Get out of my head." Right? I don't want you stripping my mountain.
Right. Yes. I agree.
I mean, no, because we'd had this conversation off camera about the sort of...
Everybody take a breath.
Breathe deep.
We're all okay.
Let me explain the context. Sometimes I do that.
Corey was worried for a moment.
Corey was very worried for a moment, which is fun.
That transition stripped my gears for a minute there, but we're good. We're good.
That sort of non-consensual invasive look into things.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what I meant. In this case, obviously, it's a little different.
It was the nudity connection.
Sorry.
No, good. Yes.
Not sorry.
You're right. Yeah. The invasive. Yes. When she looks into the hearts of the company, it is. And again, how many times do we see this when something like a theme or a motif like this is brought out in the show, and you eventually it's like, oh yeah, that has echoes somewhere, especially in the Lothlorien chapters. But it's, and I was actually like, pro tip. If you want to understand the themes of the Rings of Power better, go reread the Lothlorien chapters of the Fellowship of the Ring very carefully.
There you go.
And it will help you understand many of the... I think that's such a key source for this
and
show.
Some of the dialogue specifically, too.
Exactly. Almost every line in those chapters is relevant.
The door is shut.
Yeah.
I mean, that just...
The tides of fate are flowing. I mean,
all of that.
Everything.
Fantastic stuff.
Yeah. Even tiny lines, which most people like, the tides of fate are flowing, is like a throwaway line. Nobody pays attention to that line in the Fellowship of the Ring, except for JD and Patrick, apparently. But anyway, so this is a sidetrack. But
didn't mean to digress so much.
But you're right that kind of invasive gaze. It is uncomfortable with the mountain. It's uncomfortable. Notice how the mountain almost ceases to be a character in the second half of the season.
Right.
It gets real mad. What is it? Beginning of episode 2, where the actual earthquake happens, and we have an actual rift in the center of the mountain.
Yes.
Showing us the rift of that
cause
relationship.
Of that, though. I mean, the cause of that. Let's go back. Right. We see. What do we see coming?
The map.
On the map, and we see the black tendrils that we see every single time we see evil involved.
Yeah.
We see them coming from Galadriel's chest wound. We see them coming, obviously in the form of Squidding Pasta Boy himself when Sauron is in his goose stage.
The leaf.
And then, of course, the leaf, the ancient
tree.
leaf. So we see that exact same corruption heading up from Mordor to Kazad Doom. So is that, once again, the cause
part of the
split?
Or one of the symptoms? Is it something innate within Kazad Doom that is also potentially feeding? I mean, are they ready to step into taking that temptation? Are they at a point where they're just easy targets almost?
It makes me think. It makes me think a little bit of something that we've seen with Sauron all along, which is that he causes the problem and then offers the solution to the problem.
Yeah, that's the strategy.
So he looks like the savior.
I'm not quite sure that he's caused that earthquake, but it sure seems like he would want to.
Yes.
Because then he has the ability to give them the rings that would solve their problem.
Well, it's awfully convenient. The rings come
because
right
that's
after.
The first.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the first thing that the ring.
That's exactly what it does.
Benefits them.
Yeah.
And
that's how he phrases it. And Durin the Younger doesn't want anything to do with it.
Right.
I love that he's the only one who sees through Anatar. But
Oh man.
The other thing I was just going to bring up though is Disa's anger at the way the ring worked because of the craft and length of time that it took the Stone Singers to develop.
Cheating.
Yes, it's cheating. Yeah.
And that's a very Tolkien thought too, right? I mean, the whole idea of the machine. of magic being a shortcut.
More quicker, faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how that is never a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I really do want to talk about that we haven't had a chance to really explore because we had such little time with them is the reconciliation of Durin and Elrond and their relationship going forward. So I'd love to hear a bit from you guys about what you thought about that scene and then where we think that is going.
You're talking about the scene where one of them says, I've got these
I've had a
problems.
bad day.
I've had a bad day.
Yeah. Let's compare our bad days.
I found that scene a little challenging because I felt like they were ignoring each other a bit.
Yeah.
It's, like, it's one thing to say, I'm having a rough day, and then for
at least empathize first.
Exactly. The
Like,
friend
I'm
to
so
turn around and go,
sorry,
I don't care. I've got a bad day too.
I did feel like it was missing that immediate friendship that we saw so wonderfully in season one.
Almost,
yeah, there wasn't the relief at seeing each other like, oh my God, I had a bad day. I'm so glad to see my friend.
Yeah.
It was purely just, well, my day was worse. And yeah.
And then it cuts away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, so I agree. I think I partially agree. I agree that if it was like a little, we didn't get as much as we wanted.
That's probably just my desire to have
right,
more.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is, I mean, come on, we were all pining for more Durin and Elrond in this
They
season.
were the best in season one.
Right, I mean,
100%.
More Durin and Elrond was top 3 of everybody's wish list for season 2, and then we didn't get it for 6.5 episodes. Right?
Yeah.
So no matter, even if that scene had been 15 minutes long, it would have been too little to satisfy us. So I think that's part of what's going on there. But at the same time, I kind of liked the sort of crisis, like the friendship meets. They're both in crisis, and they have no idea that they're both in crisis.
Right.
And there was a kind of I mean, Elrond doesn't have time. But again, think about how that picks up on the other issue. The beginning of season 1, right? Elrond doesn't have time. Like he missed the life events of Durin.
Yeah.
Notice what happens at the end of season 2. Durin is grieving for his father, and Elrond isn't there. Elrond's not there again, right? I'm not saying I think like, oh, their friendship is on the rocks again, but we can see this. There's at least a kind of an irony there, right? When you had the chance, you didn't come and visit, and now look at what's happening. Right,
you didn't
now,
come to
both
father's
of them,
funeral because Oregon was falling. I don't understand your priorities.
Right, exactly. Right.
Well, and it is kind of tough though when you think about it in terms of friendship terms. When you give those two examples, it's like, well, yeah, you only come to me when you need something. You need troops.
And he does. It's true.
Exactly. That would be tough. Yeah, that would be tough in a friendship dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, remember how we were first introduced to their friendship was in the context of Elrond bragging about how he's about to pull off a diplomatic coup.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, like it's going to be a feather in his, like, I'm going to be the Celebrimbor of diplomacy, right? It's kind of like how he struts into it there at the beginning. And,
with his feathers and all.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Watch me work. Right. And so, yes, like it does seem that Elrond in some sense does not, I think there's still movement forward that needs to happen in their relationship, on Elrond's part especially.
And, we can't ignore the timeline, right? So there's still this continuing differentiation of lifespan, that what is happening in Durin's life is just not going to be the same as how Elrond contextualizes things. No. So for him coming in repeatedly to say, here's the tragedy I'm currently occurring, it's a different kind of hit, right?
Yeah.
Than what's happening with Durin.
Yeah. And I felt our sympathy was squarely fixed on Durin's side. The look that he gives when he says to Elrond, I'm about to overthrow my father.
Yeah.
And Elrond is like, I need your help. On the one hand, like, I don't blame Elrond. He can't say anything else.
No, he does.
He's got no time.
Desperately.
It's an emergent situation. And then he lays this on Durin. If you don't come and help us, Eregion is going to fall. And the look on, we've talked about nonverbal acting.
Yeah.
There are many of the actors in this show do such a marvelous job of communicating nonverbally. But when it comes to, if I want a single reaction facial expression, I'm going to Owain every
single time.
Right?
Yeah.
Like some of my most cherished moments from season 2 are his facial expressions with Anatar.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Which is amazing when you realize he's under layers of hair and prosthetics.
Yes.
And he's able to emote so effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like that look that he gives to Elrond in that moment, that
resignation.
Yes.
And,
like, you can see, all the things that you can see going on with him. But again, I feel like we're yes, we feel for Elrond. We know Eregion is falling. He's not in the wrong. This is a good, and yet we're like, oh, poor Durin again to be thrown into this
and stuck
situation.
in that,
well, the thing is, he initially chooses the Elrond response, and then is met with a dilemma that
a further increased dilemma.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Which I very much believe that he clearly made the right choice about. But again, this is what to me kind of throws it back onto Elrond at the end. And again, I'm not saying like I was at war and in fact captured by orcs at the time is a pretty good reason to miss your friend's father's funeral. Like I'm not saying
it's a valid excuse.
I don't think we have any indication that it's a problem that Elrond missed the funeral.
No. But again, it is conspicuous, I think,
in light of the conversation.
In light of the conversation,
in season 1,
because
absolutely.
Think of how is the conversation going to start next time? I mean, Elrond's going to show back the next time he shows up to Kazad and was like, "So, you're king now." Right, like there he is missing Durin's life again, right? Or like, oh yeah, so there was catch me up, right? You overthrew your father, but then didn't, and then your father sacrificed his life, and your brother came and opposed your thing, but then that got reconciled, and now you're king. And did I miss anything else?
In a nutshell,
except your whole
missed the funeral,
life,
missed the coronation,
you're right,
missed all of this stuff.
Exactly. And again, in the context where the whole frame of their story begins with how he's missed Durin's life, we're now watching him miss the rest of Durin's life.
Well, I think one more thing that we would add to Durin's list for Elrond is you're missing this giant beast that is now present in our world. So let's talk a little bit about the Balrog.
Nice segue.
I try. Let's talk a little bit about that Balrog.
Yeah. So, okay.
Lots of things to talk about.
There are.
I really let's. Is it fair to talk about it from a production design standpoint?
Please, let's start there.
This is a visual callback that worked for me because it didn't require me to stop and think and go through this. Of course, I'm not surprised that the look is familiar because John Howe's Balrog is going to look like John Howe's Balrog.
I was going to say that. How much of the visual callbacks are just because they've got the same
that's
artists
the thing. When it comes to John Howe and the things that he did, obviously it's going to be just because of that. But even the whip on the ankle of King Durin.
It was admittedly easier to cast the same Balrog.
Yes.
He was available.
Yeah.
He was available.
His agent was not driving too hard a deal.
Can we talk about the wings?
The wings. Yes, I'm so glad we're going to talk about the wings.
All right.
The wings of shadow, the wings of mist, the wings of smoke.
Yeah.
Of all the places where the show seems to go out of its way to have it both ways in a controversy, that was the best.
That was
the most successful.
It really did. It was absolutely
exactly.
successful.
Well, they explained why people might think they have wings,
right,
even though they don't.
Even though they don't.
And
I keep joking about this, but my favorite part was when he fell down.
Yes.
Like, look at how subject to gravity that Balrog is. Right? Like
not even those wings of smoke.
Look, monsters, they're just like us.
He has wings, and yet notice how he does not fly, and so we have no problem. No, that was really fun. One thing that that we've been given no reason to think that we will see this. But let me just register it would be really fun if. So this is hey, JD and Patrick, it would be really fun if the Balrog, if we had a conversation with the Balrog. Like, I don't mean like over tea. And I know that Tolkien talks about how having the Balrog not speak.
Yeah, in letter 210 about the Signum
and yet
script.
He does cast spells on doors. Right. That is like, what I mean is, it's not about conversation. It's about intelligence.
Communication.
Yes.
Like that he's not just a beast.
No.
Well, this is one of the big problems I've had with almost all portrayals.
Yes.
That these are Maya.
Yeah.
Yes.
These are humanoid creatures that rode dragons.
Fallen angels.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not often portrayed that way.
No.
Yeah. Almost never. And again, it's the thing. Well, it's always the thing that I liked least about the original Peter Jackson Balrog, is that he's presented like a beast.
Yeah.
And so far they've followed that even to the point of calling it a beast.
That's true. I'd forgotten that they did that. Yeah.
They actually use that word. And I mean, there's still like time, right, for them to that they would make the assumption or whatever that they would call it a beast and then later learn, it's not not just a beast.
To show some sort of calculating intelligence,
right?
To show some sort of planning and forethought, and
rather than
creativity,
reactive
than simply
and animalistic.
And
This
also
is
the
an
heightened
intelligent creature with
and the
sorcerer's
heightened threat
power.
that would bring.
Oh,
because
yes.
if you have motivation and planning, that's a lot scarier.
That is terrifying. Yeah,
and it could help to solve what I think feels to a lot of people like a problem, which is, well, why is it going to take the Balrog so long to? The Balrog's he's up.
He's awake. He's awake.
He's up.
Nap's over.
Okay, so there's a collapse of that tunnel, but maybe he'll find another one. How long do they have before he finds another tunnel? Right. So, I it's one thing that I've heard that people are like, what? How are we supposed to invest in future Kazad Doom story? Like, what reason are we given to believe that the Balrog is going to remain quiescent?
Right.
Again, go back to sleep. At the bottom, just because that one tunnel caved in.
Well, you know how it is. You wake up from a nap, you're angry, and then you're like, I need to close my eyes again. You know?
You think the Balrog's just
Second-
going to have a
second
snooze?
nap.
Nap.
Yeah.
We've had first nap, yes.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, now you're making me fantasize about 2 naps.
Man, I fantasize about just one.
I know. So I'm like, no, I don't know that feeling. At least I cannot remember that
I think
feeling.
I can understand that from a human experience.
just
We all want to have a nap,
question, yeah.
but in terms of a plot arc,
No,
it's not really going to
gonna
work.
fly.
Yeah,
Right.
that's not really going to fly.
But if he's
It's going to
intelligent,
fly as well as the Balrog
Oh
does.
God, you
okay.
guys!
if he's going to, that'll really drop like a rock. But yeah,
This is going to turn into a drinking game soon. I can see it.
Please. We'll all take naps.
No, but if he's intelligent,
Yep.
Yeah.
if it's a strategy,
Right.
if he's biding his time for
Right.
a reason,
Yes. He's an eternal creature and he knows it. He's got all the time in the world. Right.
He's that by all means show us that. Right.
Yes.
That I think could make for could insert, especially if I don't know. I've never had a sense of when Kazad Doom is going to fall.
No.
What?
Season
Like
3,
where
season
we are
4,
in the-
season 5. It could happen. It could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere.
Like I could see any of them working. The further out they want to make it, the cooler it would be.
Yes.
If because of course there is that. This is another. And again, whenever you notice I notice these gaps in these stories now. I'm like, JD and Patrick aren't going to be able to resist that gap. Like that's just the kind of gap that they
they'll
will
fill
fill.
that.
And so
blank.
here's the gap I mean. You look in the stories, right? Like in the Tale of Years, how long is it between when the Balrog emerges and when the dwarves leave Kazad Doom? Several years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The process of the abandonment of, like from when the Balrog, holy cow, we've got a serious infestation problem, right?
We need to call pest control on this one.
Absolutely. From there to, we just got to call it. We can't stay.
We're out.
That's making me wonder, though. So, what is the motivation of the Balrog? Like, what is his problem? What does he want? Does he just want a quiet life, and he's pissed that they're digging into his home?
Also, totally an unanswered question.
Right.
Completely. So, I mean, if it's a thinking being, then I want to know from a production standpoint, plot development, why are we concerned about the motivations and how intense are they going to be? Is it just reactionary, which is a beast?
Yeah.
I get that. We're encroaching on your space. You're going to thrash out, but it's not a beast.
Yeah.
Right.
So what other foundations are we going to have laid? Because we don't have any yet. Makes me think the fall is going to be a little bit longer. I think the Balrog's threat will
and
develop
This
before.
is why I'm hoping for
connection.
intelligent life.
A
Yeah.
connection
Balrog.
between Sauron and the Balrog.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. I mean, we have that implication.
Yeah, there is
Anatar
an
and
implication.
the Brazier
notices
there.
that
Yeah.
the Balrog's there. So, do you think we're going to see another attack on a Durin at some later point? One of the things I found interesting is, of course, King Durin is Durin the Third.
Yes.
Right.
In the original drafting of this part of the story, when Tolkien was looking at the second edition of The Hobbit, it was Durin the Third initially.
Yeah.
It became Durin the Sixth later.
Yeah.
So, which I thought was probably an accidental nod, but kind of cool still.
Probably.
I'm wondering if, are we going to get a long period of time when, as you say, the Balrog is quiet, and then it's going to appear again, and we're going to get another
Right.
Yeah.
second Durin's Bane.
It's fun. That's that is the best candidate I've heard for that might be a reference even to obscure for JD and Patrick.
Yeah, it might be.
That's I mean, it's hard to find those.
Yeah.
But that might be one.
Maybe it was
That might be
deliberate.
one.
Maybe it was
can't
deliberate.
rule
I
it
don't
out.
know, but
Yeah.
it was,
Can't rule it out. But no, I think it's gonna be, unless they're gonna have the fall of Kazad Doom happen in season 3.
Right.
I think it almost has to be intelligent,
And especially introducing the threat of the potential other heir. You know,
Yes.
that's a couple storylines happening that don't have the foundations laid yet. So we need a little bit of work
Well,
there.
I can't imagine that we're going to end the Kazad Doom storyline before, well into season 5.
Yeah.
So they
we
have
like
to
it too much. First of all, don't do it.
But
presumably not. Yeah.
Were you laughing at my foundations?
No. I was laughing because I think it's a funny idea, right? The end of season 2, they set up and next a conflict between the brothers over who's going to be
Right.
king, and we get this build up, and then it's well, moot point, kingdom's over, so
Maybe that's when we'll
guess that
find
was a
out.
whole lot of fuss over nothing.
But I mean, my thought would be that it's the one that comes on top is the one that can deal with the Balrog.
Yes.
Maybe.
So maybe they
Potentially.
need to introduce that kind of conflict, so the big conflict makes more sense.
Maybe we'll find out that the name of the brother is Durin the Sixth. The King Durin is like George
Lordy.
Foreman naming all his kids Durin, and he is going to become the king.
Oh god,
that would solve that problem about little being called Durin.
things I didn't thought would be mentioned. George Foreman.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
All right, final thoughts on Kazad Doom.
So thinking
shall we
of the
wrap
way
up
in
here?
which, going back to how it's potentially the Balrog question, which I agree, by the way, would certainly that's got to be a talking point at the the king
Christmas
to be
dinner?
debates.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. They're going to have electoral.
They're
debates.
going to have a debate.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's how I'm going to
What's
solve
your
the
solution?
Balrog
Yeah, what's your
problem.
solution to
Yeah.
the Balrog problem?
Right,
What's your
right.
policy on Balrog?
You heard your opponent say.
What is your
that-
stance on the Balrog question?
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. But anyway, so clearly that's going to come up. But thinking again about, I want to go back to the black tendrils on the map.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And the season clearly begins with the question, the threat. Why has the mountain stopped listening to them?
Right.
That is the crisis.
Right.
The sunlight is a symptom.
Yes.
The real crisis is there has been a division between the dwarves and the mountains. Something, and that the fist of darkness has closed, or the fist of shadow has closed around Kazad Doom, says King Durin. And I see every reason to believe, based on what we're told, that he's correct about not only because he's always correct before he puts on the ring, but again, everything seems to point in that way, including the map.
Right.
That there is an external evil that has moved in and is now interfering with the mountain, and the mountain itself perhaps needs to be rescued from this, metaphorical fist that's closing around it. What is the relationship between that and the Balrog? Between the tendrils of darkness, the fist of darkness around the mountain, the Balrog, and Sauron. Right.
Yeah.
And
and like you said, we don't know what Sauron did from Spaghetti Monster to
Yes.
start of the show.
Yes.
So he could have done some traveling and laid some oily, slicky bits,
yeah,
problematic tendrils of spaghetti.
So what I
Squiddy
find
pasta everywhere.
what I find most interesting about that map moment
Yeah.
is that map moment is the only place in season 2 where Sauron's evil, or the evil that is the Sauron-like evil at the very least, is associated with Mordor.
Yeah.
Because it comes from Mount Doom.
Mordor.
Right.
Yeah.
And apart from that reference, we would have nothing in season 2 that would explicitly say, apart from our own associations and assumptions we bring to it,
Right.
there's nothing internal to season 2 that suggests a connection, an intrinsic connection between Sauron, his power, and Mordor / Mount Doom.
What's the other place where we've seen Mount Doom? Is it in
Dreams?
Dreams.
In the we see it
We
in
see
the
the
Palantir.
Yeah.
We see it in the Stranger's Dreams.
Yep.
Yep.
That's where we first see it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does Gil-galad sees it? Doesn't Gil-galad
When
see
does
it?
he see it?
In
He
his
does. I can't recall.
wacky vision that looks so weird. With
With
the
the weird
fish
rat.
mouth.
Dead fish.
I don't think
No,
not
we
there.
just
Yeah.
watched that
We
one
just
when we
watched
did the
it. Yeah,
fan.
I don't
Okay.
We see
Soundtrack.
we see explosions, but I think it's maybe not. Anyway,
Yeah.
you guys have seen it more
I think that
recently.
might be the wall
So-
of the Region.
Yeah,
that
that's
you said.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I'm just
Connected
wondering
with
what
the dead
the
fish in
what
the
the
riverbed.
what they're setting up to be linked to Mordor in this season.
Right. Because I mean, obviously, I mean,
maybe they're just trying to draw a geological connection because of the volcanic eruption.
So,
but the tendrils.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
I think really that
That's
just
the
keeps
focal
going
point.
down.
If we
It's
hadn't
a
had
the
visual
map scene,
representation.
Yeah, if we hadn't had the map scene,
Yeah.
and we just had
Narvi's
saying
explanation.
like, a fire mountain blew up, and
Right.
earthquakes,
The-
and
yeah.
that's like plausible.
Sure.
You know,
Sure,
like,
maybe it's a
accidents
little
happen.
farther away, and
It is,
not
but
in the
like,
same mountain chain. But okay,
knowing what I know about geology, I'd buy it for $1.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, okay. But you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but the
But
map,
the map. Yeah,
the signal I am receiving is that is not in fact
yeah.
just
I
a
am
purely
paying attention,
naturalistic
JD
thing.
and
Yeah,
Patrick.
Right,
I see
right.
the tendrils.
Right.
I see your
But
hint.
coming from Mordor, not from where
Right.
Anatar
Mount
is
Doom
in
is
Eregion.
the source of them.
Yeah.
And so the question of to what extent is the power of Sauron already linked?
Right. Has
Exactly,
he already
to
set
the
up the
evil.
forges?
Right.
Has he already done anything there? We know he was
And
there.
if it
We
isn't,
saw him at the end of season 1.
Right.
right, we saw him going. We
That-
saw him
that
heading
lovely look
towards
back
Mount
Heading
Doom.
that way, yeah.
Yeah.
And we see him now. And
As Halbrand.
this is another. This is another thing. I think that people in general are too quick to make assumptions about the non-passage of time in the transitions within this show.
Yes.
A lot of times
I've done
people,
that.
when two scenes happen, even back to back, certainly between two episodes, even between the two seasons, a lot of people assume like, well, this is supposed to be immediately afterwards. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, well, months didn't
Well, if
pass.
you
And
don't
I'm
see
like,
stalagmites,
are you
Could
sure?
have,
if you
right.
don't see stalagmites grow, how do you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
that
love
scene was
I-
great.
That was great.
You
That
should
was
have
such
seen
a
it.
subtle.
You should have
Yeah.
seen us going through that scene. We
Yeah.
were like Googling
Yeah.
how fast they grow
And we
and
were
figuring
like,
out
measuring
years,
them
and I think
like,
it was
trying-
around 1,000.
How many years
and
would it be?
It was
And
great.
yeah, no, that was great.
Doing the math.
Yeah, but anyway, so it's
You could always put a mark on the candle.
Like
On
to
the
see how
candle.
what the passage
yeah,
of time is.
yeah, exactly.
Because that works.
Right.
Clearly.
And I see what you're saying, but I
non-passage
also,
of time.
but that's also confusing, right? So like
Sure.
the standard viewer is not going
yeah.
to take a
No,
moment to think
look,
about that.
yeah.
So it's
I'm not
it's
defending it.
It's a
I'm
difficult
just-
line to
It's,
lay,
yes,
right?
It's yet another example in which the show asks us to roll with a lot.
Yes.
And you have to be willing to do that, or else it's not going to
It's
work
not gonna
for
work.
you. No. Yeah. But in any case, what I'm saying is, we see in the very last shot of season 1, Sauron as Halbrand going towards Mount Doom. We see Halbrand at the beginning of season 2 going to Adar's camp.
Yeah.
Right, and getting captured.
How much time?
And people assume,
Those two
that's
things.
where he was going.
Right.
Really?
Really?
Is it? He's not wearing the same clothes.
No.
We have no idea how much time has passed. He could have gone to Mount Doom, established his forges, and been there for a year, for all we know.
Sure.
Before he goes.
Started
Certainly long enough for
Started
Adar.
Barad-dûr,
Yeah.
laid the foundations. We don't know. I mean, like it's.
no clue.
I'm not asserting that definitely happened,
But it's possible.
It's possible,
Yeah.
and given that one moment of the power, the evil power radiating from Mount Doom, it seems possible. But again, like, notice how easy it is to fall into the Galadriel trap. It must be Sauron,
Right.
You know, like everything that happens,
Everything
and you're like,
is
this is
Sauron.
all part of Sauron's scheme.
But when they're actually showing you on the map,
see
and,
daggers
you
where there
know,
are none.
Right,
there's-
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, nicely put.
Well done.
Except sometimes she's right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's anyway, so that to me is one of the really interesting questions that I hope we learn more about. This is one of the, I don't object. I understand how it makes it harder for people. I don't object to the time jump problems, but I do object if they do that kind of thing and if they never pay it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like, pay it off, please.
yeah.
Like,
if you're gonna do it,
right. So, and like, so
We need a
to give
reason
them
why.
credit, like the beginning of episode 1 of season 2, we did get like an attempt to backfill.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem is their story, which backfilled, now also requires more
backfill.
backfill. And you know, I would like to. We don't have to start
These-
every season with a Sauron flashback, but with the way you're setting up these scenes, I would quite like to
Awesome.
Did he go to Linden? I think he did, but we don't. Did he go to Mordor? You know, did he already visit the Cracks of Doom? Did he establish that?
kind
his
of looking
forges
that
there?
way.
Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah. There are storylines, there were aspects of storylines that have not yet been earned.
Yes.
And we have to wait and see whether future
and you do have to
seasons
remind
will-
yourself we're only 40% of the way through, right?
Exactly.
But again, I think I've said this a dozen times now. It's a big ask,
Yes,
so we've got to
it
have
is.
a little patience, but we do realize we're only 2/5 of the way
I mean,
into
that
it.
is like one of the unofficial subtitles of the show.
Yeah.
2/5.
No,
Patience.
The Rings of Power. It's a big ask.
Yeah,
It asks a lot.
It does.
We saw that
Demands
from
a
season 1
lot.
to season 2. There were a bunch of things in season 1 where I'm like, I didn't like it, but there may be things that come to light in season 2
Yes.
that make me feel a lot more
Yes.
comfortable with
Right.
season 1.
And some
And
of
they
those things
did.
happen.
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of them, I think.
But
for
it
me.
asks a lot of restraint of you, right?
Yes.
To be,
I have to-
a
yeah.
lot of patience.
Yes.
That had to be
Yes.
actively
hold off
applied.
Exactly.
and wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 All right,
absolutely.
guys, that was an excellent deep dive into Kazad Doom. So
Delving, you
not
might say.
indeed, a
Yes,
deep delving
yes.
into Kazad Doom. So thank you very much for joining us. It was so great having that conversation.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care. Hello. So I am here with James Tauber of the Digital Tolkien Project, and we wanted to do this kind of special one-off segment because the work that he's been doing I find so unique and very applicable to the work that I do, and I just think it's really cool. So I really just want to talk about it a little bit more and to show everybody some of the tools that you create that are incredibly useful to me and I think would be very useful to other people, because so much of what I do feels very subjective, right? It's all, well, I see this and I feel this. Well, what you're doing is creating data. You're actually capturing things that I can stare at graphs and charts and see trends and see things that are happening that I don't think I would have seen otherwise. So I want you to tell us a little bit about Digital Tolkien Project and what you've done with Rings of Power, and then we're going to walk through a couple of examples of some of the things he's done.
Yeah. So the Digital Tolkien Project, broadly speaking, is really interested in analysing the texts of Tolkien and making quantitative information available to scholars. And a lot of the focus has been on the texts themselves. That's most of the focus. And so I've done a lot of work on that and linguistic analysis of the texts and making it easier to understand the structure of texts and so on. But then Rings of Power, I wanted a way of applying that same sort of quantitative analysis. And so I built this website, Rings of Power Data, that tries to bring together interesting annotations of an analysis of initially the subtitles to get what the characters are speaking and get a sense of that.
So still capturing the words.
Capturing the words that are spoken, annotating them with scene information, like where the scene boundaries are and locations and stuff. Who's doing the speaking. I can get into more detail about how we did all of that. But then the idea is to present that in visually pleasing ways, to just picking up on what you said, to really help people understand what their intuitions are.
Yeah, that's a really good way to phrase it.
I think
this is what I'm seeing. And then I look at, I feel like I just need to pull up an example.
Yeah.
So there's an example where you took, I think it's a 10-second frame.
Every 10 seconds. A frame is taken every 10 seconds of each of the episodes.
And we have a color slice, basically, of every 10 seconds we get a picture of a frame, and then it's squished together. You've probably seen these online. They're just really interesting palettes. But as soon as I started looking at that, I was like, yep, because that big black patch in the right-hand side, which I talk about in one of our episodes, it just illustrates the darkness that was inherent in all of these places. And yes, that's end credits, but it's a lot more than end credits as well.
Right.
So there's just a lot of darkness happening in the middle right-hand side of these episodes. And then that bottom layer getting from light into dark. And it was so fun to go through this because I was talking to somebody about the episode or the scene I wanted to go into detail about for that episode. I was like, I really want to do, the death of Adar all the way to the Galadriel rebirth. And looking at the light in my mind, I was like, he said it was morning. Celebrimbor said it was morning time, but it's not hopeful. It's very kind of dark and grim. And then it gets warmer, I'm pretty sure, when they get to the woods, and there's this progression towards warmth. And then I looked at that and was like, there it is. There it is. We're watching the warmth happen, and we end bathed in light. So I got to see it visually represented.
Yeah, I think it does two things. One is it provides a more objective, explicit demonstration of what your intuitions are. The other thing it can be used for is to pursue new questions as well. Maybe you didn't notice things, but this tells you something that you can then go and bring in your qualitative analysis and your expertise. This is just sort of almost the map telling you, here's an interesting area to look at.
Exactly.
And you can take it from there.
And some of it, I mean, this isn't massively revealing to certain things, because you can see, as you and I were talking about earlier, episode 8, there's this orange bar. That's the Balrog scene. Okay, yeah, obviously it's going to be a different color,
Right.
But there may be some other bits that it's a beam of light, and you think, oh, that's going to be, Galadriel as a lit up elf feeling hopeful and reborn, but actually it's something totally different. So It's just nice to be able to pull that together. And you were telling me you're going to potentially make this a frame by frame scrollable option, which is
there's a lot of information, so I have to work out sort of how best to summarize it. The other thing that I want to do is, this is trying to convey how the palette changes across time over the whole episode.
Right.
But one of the things that I want to do is bring together just those scenes that are in a particular location.
Yes.
So you can do something like, see, what's the Kazad Doom palette look like? What's the Linden palette? Like, our intuition is that the Linden palette's a lot more yellow.
Right.
But we can actually quantitatively measure that.
And how does it change, right? So how does it start and how does it end? I mean, watching Eregion from the beginning of season 2 to the end of season 2 obviously is going to be quite the palette shift.
Yep.
So being able to see that in qualitative, quantitative, represented detail, fantastic.
Yep.
I also used an example of yours. I think it was episode 2 of Rings and Realms, where I was doing a bit about Disa and Durin, because I love that opening scene of them walking through the market and how that represented their relationship and what was going on within Kazad Doom. But then that morning, you had posted your details about that episode, and there was so much in there. So I'm hoping you can walk me back to that moment where I found data about Disa and how many words she spoke against Durin. So if you can talk me through that, we're going to go through the site.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did with the subtitle file, I say we because it wasn't just me. I had a team of people. Shout out to Philip and Sarah, who helped me so much with this. We took the subtitles, but the subtitles don't necessarily say who is speaking,
right,
or where they are or anything. So we take the subtitles, we go through and annotate each line with who the speaker is.
Wow.
And then identify the scene boundaries and the region boundaries as well. And then that all gets fed into this. So if you're
there's a lot of human work before it goes into a program.
There is.
Yeah.
There are potentially ways of automating some of that, but part of the fun is
getting into it.
Doing it. This is one of the things I love about this whole field is it gives me an excuse to dive deep into the text and the show as well. Like, it's not just the computers do nice things with the results, but at the end of the day, you still need to do the scholarship.
Well, and the more work you put into it, the more you get out of it. So, if you know this information, you're able to glean so much more from it.
Exactly. So if you're interested once you have that information, there's all sorts of ways that you can break it down, by episode. But let's do it by characters first. So if you go to the characters navigation in the top.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
And scroll down. One of the things you can do is look at all the named speaking characters. So if you scroll down one more, this is a list of all the named characters that speak
oh my God, I love
in the
this.
show.
Yep.
Telling you how many episodes they speak in, how many different regions, how many scenes, how many lines they speak, and ultimately how many words they speak. And you can filter that down by race as well. So if you're interested in the dwarves, you can click on dwarves.
I see it. My brain's already like, ooh, but I want another column here where we figure out percentages. Like how
sure.
much.
We can
okay, but we'll go to dwarves for now.
Yeah. So we can get a breakdown of by all these different measurements. But if you're interested in how many words are spoken, obviously by far the 3 biggest speakers among the dwarves are Disa, Durin, and the 2 Durins, Prince Durin and King Durin. But you can see the
well, and this is, the wonderful example of the data that was given to us. I was doing the analysis of this scene and really just felt like Disa was so important and she was really driving this scene forward. And then I took a look at the data and you can see Disa has 1,500 words to Durin's 2,300 words. And she's on screen significantly less than him. So she speaks a lot more. So there was something about the import that was given to Disa through her words and what she was able to accomplish in her time on screen. And now you can see it in the numbers. It's like, oh yeah, look, they did give her quite a bit to work with.
She's only in half the scenes, but she has disproportionate number of lines and words.
Yeah. So that was just really useful to me. It's like, oh look, there's a data point. Yep. And then the fact that we can do it by all the different groups That's just phenomenal. So, and you can see we can do this by region too, right?
Right. So you can see how many words, how many scenes are in each of the regions, how many different characters speak, and of course the number of words that are spoken as well.
Are there things with the site that you're hoping to do as you carry forward? Because I did see at the bottom of the page, it says a side quest of the Digital Tolkien Project. Love that terminology. But are there other things that you kind of have in your mind of like, oh, I really wish that I could get this data out of it, or I really wish I could pull this information?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I want to do more. One is because we've got I don't show the actual words that are spoken other than to give, like there's a search capability. You can search for, if you're wondering where does this particular line get spoken, you can click on search and look for it, but it won't give you the full line.
Okay.
I didn't want to run into any issues with Amazon about the copyright issues and so on. So I don't show the full text, but I do have the full text in there. And so there's a lot of linguistic analysis I'd like to do, like what words does Galadriel use that other characters don't use and so on. Is there any linguistic difference in the way different characters or different races speak? Another thing that I want to do is annotate other things going on in the scenes. So, when a battle's taking place, those sorts of questions, even things like as well, time of day, interior and exterior, I'd love to flag on the scene so we can get a sense of how much is happening at nighttime, how much is happening in the daytime, those kinds of ways of slicing and dicing the data, basically. And over on the sort of visualization of things, as I mentioned before, I do want to do a lot more of what's going on at a region level. How do the regions differ, not only between one another, but also over time? How do certain regions change?
And the region thing, I'm going to go do it by episode, but it was also really lovely to see that. So this is per episode. We can see season 2, episode 1. There's a lovely flow here of where we're going and how we travel. So you can see that with episode 1, episode 2, very similar. There's this kind of cadence to the time. So it makes sense. We're introducing, we're giving more information, we're concluding per episode. So we get these kind of spaces. And then we get down to Eregion. Right. So when you then have a visual like this, it has such a heavier impact. I'm looking at it and going, of course, we're going to spend a lot of time here because we are doomed to die in Eregion. So it was visually, again, it just kind of reiterated that point, or like validated that point of like, yep, this is
this is structurally so different, because if you look at most of the others, they typically have a quick sequence of back and forth, and then they sort of settle into 2 or 3 different regions that we're going to switch back and forth 2 or 3 times.
That we're able to kind of know that going into each episode. It's like, all right, where are we this episode? It helped us in our analysis to kind of plan and say, we're mostly in these 2 areas. But then, then you have this that is so different from what we've done before. Changes things.
And you can flip this around. This at the moment is showing a particular episode and how all the regions are represented. But if you click on Eregion, say, you then sort of flip that round and say, how is Eregion conveyed across the different episodes? And you can get a sense of what episodes it appears in and just how much more it starts to appear. Obviously, a lot in season 1, episode 8, but then again in season 2, episode 7.
Oh, I'm already just staring at it going, oh, wow. So basically what you do is phenomenal. Really love that. And I hope we get an opportunity to do a bit of an exercise at some point where I'm thinking maybe we pick a scene and we utilize the data to do a deep dive so you guys can see a bit more of the scene analysis work, but incorporating data analysis into it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining.
My
I
pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you again soon.